Hey there and welcome to Matt's Garage. Today I'm going to be replacing the rear brakes on this 2011 Hyundai Santa Fe. So watch along, I'm going to show you step by step how to do it. I'm going to be replacing the calipers, rotors and pads today. This video should apply directly to 2007 to 2012 Hyundai Santa Fe's. Now the first step, I guess, is identifying that you have a brake issue and that you in fact need to replace your brake components. It's pretty obvious on this one. If you look at it, the rotor's getting chewed up, and actually the symptom I noticed is a squealing sound, which is not an uncommon symptom to notice when you have a braking issue. There's actually a squealer on a lot of brake pads to notify you when the pad's getting worn, but in this case that's not why it was squealing. In this case it actually had a common Hyundai Santa Fe issue where the rear brake calipers are stuck on. They're sticking on, and so the brakes are dragging all the time. So not only did I have the squealing noise, but I have heat build up. If you go around and feel all your wheels, you can tell if one's significantly hotter, you've got a braking issue on that wheel. So this rear right wheel is the one I heard the squealing coming from. It's also generating the most heat. The other back left is also generating more heat than it should, so I'm going ahead and replacing both rear brake calipers, and you just automatically are going to do new rotors, or get your rotors resurfaced, and new pads when you do that, so that it's all complete. So that's what we're going to be doing, and the first step of course is going to be jacking up the vehicle, which we want to go under the factory jacking location, which is where these 3 notches are in the pinch weld just under the vehicle there, just in front of the rear wheel. That's where we're going to jack up, so I'll show you that in a moment. And then we're going to use a 21mm socket to remove the lug nuts. You want to crack those loose before you jack up the vehicle if you don't have an impact driver like I do. So we're just going to do one side at a time, real basic. We're going to do a brake fluid flush while we're at it. So I'm actually going to start under the hood by sucking out the old brake fluid from the reservoir, replacing it with new, so that when we remove these calipers and gravity does its thing and brake fluid comes out, the old fluid will come out. The new fluid will start to come into the lines, and our flush will begin before we even bleed the brakes. Okay, so a few basic tools you'll need for sure is a 14mm socket, 18mm open-end wrench. You'll need a Phillips number 3 bit, and an impact's nice to have. Brake fluid, make sure you get the right kind. This vehicle requires DLT3. There's DLT4 and DLT5. A higher number isn't better. The stuff your brake system calls for is better, and if you put the wrong stuff in and mix it all together, you can have problems, so don't do that. Brake clean, always want that when you're working on brake systems. This is a very heavy vehicle, so I'm going to make sure to put some extra blocking just to make sure I'm safe while I'm working on it. So the wheel is stuck on, so I'm just going to hammer on the back side of the tire. Make sure you don't hammer on the rim, just the tire. And it's a good idea to thread a couple lug nuts back on loosely so that the wheel doesn't just come flying off. Now for extra insurance, I will put the removed wheel under the vehicle. And now I'm just going to lower it onto my safety block. Okay, so I left some pressure on the jack, some pressure on the block, and the wheel is there if all else fails. Then you still want to grab the vehicle and just give it a good shake and make sure it's stable. Okay guys, the first step is going to be to remove the 2 14mm bolts that hold the caliper mounting bracket on. Okay, so before we get too far progressed, we'll also want to remove this 12mm fastener off the brake line, and you're going to want to have a drain pan available. It's going to drip brake fluid out of here, and you're going to want to clean off really good around there, like wire wheel it or something. But first I'm actually going to go under the hood now and suck out the old nasty brake fluid and put some fresh stuff in before I take that off. Also a good time to check for worn parts. I've already done that. Just kind of pull on everything, see if anything's loose. Okay, so it says on the reservoir here it can take DOT 3 or 4, so I guess you could use either. You want to wipe that cap really good before you start. Another thing I'll warn you is you don't want to get brake fluid on your paint anywhere. It will ruin your paint. So when I'm done wiping the cap, I'm going to take the dirty rag and stuff it down around here, because I'm going to be likely spilling down in here and I don't want to get it on the paint. You probably can't see it, but I just set a bucket over here where I'm going to be squirting those drips into. Okay, that's about the limit that I can get out of there, but I got a lot out of there. Just make sure that this is all clean. You don't want any contaminants in your braking system. Okay, now we just have to add a bit of fresh brake fluid. So here you can see how I had that set up, and I had the bucket right here. And always protect your paint. If you do happen to splash on the paint, make sure you get it off of there instantly. So now we are just going to set the cap on here loosely. We want it to actually be able to vent, but we don't want dirt going into the system, so I'm just going to set it on there. And now we can move around and undo that brake line. We'll get rid of this off of here to eliminate the chance of an accident happening. We're actually going to need that later in the process when we take that line off. In fact, it will drain into there. So on the factory unit, these nuts right here are actually 18mm. Actually, it fits loosely on them, but either way, I can't get a wrench in here at all. This is too tight, so this is all I can get in here is these baby channel locks, but that'll be enough. I'm going to hold that nut. This is 14mm, and then I'm just going to use my impact. See? So that's perfectly acceptable for the little bit of force it takes. There we go. So here we are, we got our drain pan. Oh, and I just got to clean that off. $12mm on this. Now I'll warn you, if you get air in your ABS pump, it's really hard to bleed out. That's why I topped up the system completely first. I think a new one of these is provided with the new parts. And then just work this off of here carefully. There we go. It's just gonna dangle and it'll keep dripping the whole time we're working here. That's fine. So I still gotta get that lower caliper bolt off. I just wanted to break this loose first so it wasn't flopping around as I was working. Make sure you get that brake fluid off your gloves so you're not getting it on your paint. Just trying to get that worked on there with all the rust. There we go. We broke that loose. Okay, the caliper bracket should be loose now, so I'm just going to pry the caliper and bracket off with this. Okay, and we'll just put it aside this way up so it doesn't leak. So now I just need to get these Phillips number 3 screws out, one there, and you might want to just hammer on them a bit first, or put some penetrating oil on them to make sure you break the rust loose in there. I'll demonstrate. So if you just take your bit, get it in there and then hammer on it a bit. Not only does that seat the bit in the screw head, but it also breaks the rust loose around the head and in the threads. Just like that. If one is stubborn like this, try rocking it forward a bit and then back it out. There we go. Okay, now if this isn't seized on, it should just slide off. It looks like it is seized on, so I'm just going to hammer around the face of it a little here. Another thing you can do, there's actually threads in these holes for a bigger bolt to fit in that you can use to push this off if it's really glued on there. I don't think it will come to that, and we're replacing the part, so I can really beat on it here. There we go. And that's your emergency brake drum in there, so if you're putting this back on, you want to clean that dust out really good. Now just keep in mind that this is toxic dust, so you don't want to blow it with an air gun or anything like that, because then you'll be breathing it. So that's what brake clean is meant for. You wash it off with brake clean. And then you can just wipe it dry with a shop towel. So we're pretty well ready to go back together now. There's a couple things you want to check while you're in here. Does your emergency brake function correctly? Because now's the time to correct it. If it is not, there's an adjuster on it, or you may need new shoes or whatever. I am going to go around and top up that brake fluid because a lot has leaked through, and I can go ahead and just keep adding fresh stuff. I have a lot of brake fluid. It's not terribly expensive, and that way I won't be introducing air into the system as I'm working here. So there are right hand and left hand calipers. So you'll be getting a pair, and they are different, and the difference is this is the air vent. This is the bleeder screw, and that needs to go on top no matter what. So if you follow that guideline, you won't get it wrong. You don't even have to check the part number. That always goes on top because air rises out the top. So as you can see, this is a complete unit, completely assembled, ready to go on. I just have to slip some brake pads in here, and I can slide it right on. There are these slides that get installed in there with the pads. As I said, there's your new bolt, there's your new copper washers that you'll have to use to seal your brake hose to the new caliper. So now we're going to put some grease on everything. These new pads I got actually came with this grease, but it's like it's more like RTV than grease, and I don't like it. So I'm going to go with this Bosch grease I had left over from another brake job I recently did. And you just want to grease all in here so that those pads slide in there nice and easily. Okay, so that's all you need to grease on there. On the actual caliper here, you want to grease here, and you want to grease right here, just like this. That's where your pads are riding. Then all around here. Okay, so we've got our pad slides in the caliper mounting bracket, and we're just going to put our pads in. Okay, so just like you can see on the old part here, there is a squealer there. That is that part on the new pad, and that goes to the inside, the side with the mounting bolts on it. And then we'll go ahead and tighten this up same way we loosened it. You might want to do this by hand, but I'm not going to. There we go. I'll double check those when it's on the vehicle. So make sure you don't get contaminants into that bolt or washer, so leave it in the bag until you're ready to put the hose on. So you can see that's fully assembled, ready to go on, and can just squeeze those pads to the sides in there as far as they'll go. Make sure these pads slide freely in there. Sometimes they have a defect on the end you might have to clean up with a grinder or something. These look pretty good though. Okay, so we got the shiny new brake rotor ready to go on, but before you put it on, you just want to spray it down with brake clean, because they have shipping oil on them so they don't rust in the package. So especially in the emergency brake drum in here and stuff, you want to wash that all out with brake clean first. Then you just want to line up your screw holes there, and it will slide right on. Now off camera, I'm just going to wire wheel that rust off of these because they're really rusty. Just going to put a little dab of 3-in-1 oil on them for easy assembly. So here we go, we are ready to go on here with the caliper. Again, make sure that that bleeder screw is on the top, not the bottom. I just went and grabbed a 14mm ratcheting wrench. I think that'll be handy for this. So I will include torque specs for these if I can find them. I just dig them up really good by hand. So now we're actually ready to connect that hose up, and what I'm going to do is crack loose the bleeder screw first. So you take this rubber off the end, that's just a cap. Okay, there. And that looks like 10 millimeter to me. I'll check. Yeah, 10 millimeter. So I got that loose. Take your plug out. Now you've got those clean parts in a bag. This is where they come into play. First of all, let's make sure this line's really clean. Really clean. One washer on each side the fitting. Now definitely don't use an impact for this part. Just make sure it's going together square, no debris in there. And then you don't really have to go crazy with these, but give it a good snug pull. There we go. Especially with my big ratchet, that was more than enough there. So now I was hoping it would kind of just self-bleed, since I never got any air back into the lines. The lines were draining the whole time. So I'm actually going to go fill the reservoir and see if the added pressure will bring any out the bleeder. Okay guys, I just went and topped up the reservoir, and as you can see, it is self-bleeding. I'm going to let it run out for a while here to make sure all the air's passed through, and just let it drip through. Here we go. I've been just letting it drain out the bleeder for about 5 or 10 minutes here, and I'm just going to tighten up the bleeder now and put the cap on it, and I'm betting we're good. Now again, the bleeder's like pipe thread. You don't have to really lock it down harsh, but just firmly. Now what you want to do is brake clean everything. Get rid of all those drips and just go over everything so you get any grease off that you may have got on or anything. Okay, now don't forget to put the little protective cap over the bleeder. It just keeps dirt and debris out of there so that the next time you go to use it, it works. Now all that's left is to put the wheel back on. If you want, now would be a good time to just put a little paint on all of this so nothing rust, especially that rotor is just bare steel, so it's going to rust. So I'm actually going to grab some black spray paint and just put a quick coat around here. So there we go. That'll also prevent your wheel from getting stuck on later. And don't worry about that little overspray. That'll come right off when you hit the brakes. You do want to make sure you pump up your brakes when you first get back in the vehicle. Make sure you have full pedal pressure. And then when you get out on the highway, do a couple of really hard stops from a higher speed, and bed in those new pads into the new rotors really good. They're not going to fully contact at first. You got to do that and kind of get the surface film off of everything and get everything made it up together. Now I just wanted to point out, in case you're somebody that doesn't like to take anything extra apart, you can get these pads in here. I just was checking without disassembling the caliper and bracket, but honestly it takes 2 seconds to disassemble that. It's way easier to get the clips in. You have to kind of force them in from the ends if you have it assembled like this. So totally up to you. You could do that, but I'm going to go ahead and pop this second one apart too. So before you put your wheel back on, just make sure the hub face is really clean here. Just use a wire brush like that and scrub off any loose scale. Okay guys, as you can see, I actually got everything all done. Went to test drive and I had a bit of a soft pedal, so I went ahead and hooked up the bleeder bottle. And what you do there is you hook up the hose to the bleeder, then you loosen the bleeder about a turn, then you go in the vehicle, pump the brakes really slowly, about 5 times, then you come back under here, tighten up the bleeder, and then remove the hose. Make sure you do it in that order, and then check the master cylinder when you're done. Make sure you top it off. So I'm all done. That bleeder is actually tight. I'm just going to pull the hose off and put the little caps on, and I'm all done. Then I'm just going to test drive it here. Thanks a lot for watching Matt's Garage. I do hope you found the video helpful and informative. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have yourself a great day.